I believe that takes care of all our news. And again, my friends, so much to go over. Unfortunately, never a dull moment. And there's going to be very, very much to go over on this episode 201. Last week was all mass animal die-offs and the mysterious death of John P. Wheeler III, as well as all the other related sundry updates that we give for you here on MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome to new listeners, and of course a hearty welcome to returning listeners and the growing band of folks who dig Media Monarchy and who help get the word out about this show. And I think this show is unlike any other you'll find out there. Not saying it's the best, I'm saying it's unlike. So let's just dive right into it and glance at Google News. Tunisia declares state of emergency, and we could see that building, and we are going to cover the situation in Tunisia coming up on this episode. Funeral begins for judge killed in Tucson rampage. Judge John Roll, perhaps the hidden angle in this Arizona assassination story. And we also have food price jumps protested in the aforementioned Tunisia, as well as Algeria and Morocco. And we discussed rising food prices worldwide on our previous episode, 200B, where we went over all the latest from my sister sites, cyberspacewar.com and foodworldorder.com. We'll leave the news open so we can track anything going down in the New World Order. And as I tell folks sometimes, it's a massive build-up in the pre-production for trying to put this show together for you live. And then, of course, even the post-production and the upload and all of that. So generally, once it hits Friday evening and Saturday, I try and take a little break. But, of course, there was no break. The ratcheting up of events seems to happen continuously and at a breakneck pace, and what we try and say, and perhaps what we don't point out here often enough, is that so much of this is a psychological war, a psychological operation, a war on consciousness. We're all being built up to tear each other apart along phony divisions. The little stupid differences are nothing compared to the big stupid similarities. But we've been engineered to tear each other apart. Our regular people, brothers and sisters, we're all around the world just trying to get by. Unfortunately, most nations have been hijacked by a self-imposed, self-anointed elite with their burden of running the world for us. But I digress. Such was the case with last week's mass animal die-offs. And when we have these massive news events, so much to go over, and there's no way I can go into every bit of minutia. And it's also difficult to find one article or one bit of text that kind of crystallizes such a massive situation, such as it was last week with the animal die-offs and the murder of John Wheeler, such as this week with the Arizona assassination story. So my post goes back to last Saturday. And the text posted to Media Monarchy is from a Paul Joseph Watson article fairly early in what would slowly and sometimes quickly unfold in this case. So let's just take the text and we'll take it from there. Arizona assassin obsessed with mind control. Jared Loughner. That's Loughner, even sometimes referred to or pronounced as Loner. Jared Loughner, the gunman who shot Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords and numerous other victims, including a federal judge and a 9-year-old girl during a political event in Tucson last Saturday, January 8th, was a U.S. military recruit who was obsessed with mind control, mirroring the circumstances of many other mass shooters in history. Loughner's YouTube channel contains several rambling text-based videos which discuss his fascination with mind control. In one of his online rants, Loughner said that he was, quote, a United States military recruit at MEPS in Phoenix, end quote. Reports suggest that he also may have been deployed to Afghanistan at one point. The mission of UMEPCOM and the Phoenix MEPS is to process individuals for enlistment or induction into the armed services, end quote, states the website of the United States Military Entrance Processing Command. The fact that Loughner was part of the U.S. military and yet was being characterized as an anti-government conspiracy nutcase by the establishment media is a complete contradiction. Loughner's multitude of viewpoints seem to transcend political classification. Watching his YouTube videos, he's clearly a schizophrenic who is obsessed with mind control and other bizarre left-field issues of minutia. Loughner's vulnerable and psychotic profile, combined with his interest in mind control, mirrors other famous assassins such as Mark David Chapman, John Hinckley, and of course, Columbine killers Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. And that was my post originally. Meanwhile, collecting up the mass amounts of related media spilling out. And hopefully, which has kind of become the case more recently and most recently here on Media Monarchy, is that we just have time to go over the headlines. And of course, I've massaged the headlines to hopefully give as much info as possible in a short amount of time, but hopefully this isn't a bad thing. Hopefully, as the show has grown and I spin more plates, I hope we're not losing the thread. And if that becomes the case, and if it is the case, and I just haven't realized it yet, we'll put the brakes on. I know when I've looked back at some of the really early episodes of this radio show, we maybe only went over 10 or 12 articles in a 2-hour episode. We've gotten to the point now where we're probably going over nearing hundreds of articles and stories in a 2-hour episode. So again, the way I do these and put this all together, there's no real mystery to it. Subscribe to feeds and subscribe to words and stories and searches that are in your area of interest. Save those and start to put them together and write blurbs and post them up and save PDFs of the articles you use. So, as I was saying, we're going to read these headlines into the record, stopping periodically. And like I said, there was no one other great article to get us really up to date on all of these areas. But as you can see, the mugshot that came out in the days after this massacre a deranged individual. There's no doubt about it. So here are our massive updates to the Arizona assassination story. Loughner held without bail. More on that from Weasel Zipper. WeaselZippers.us. Ted and Jared. Unabomber and Moussaoui lawyer Judy Clark to represent Loughner. Preliminary hearing coming up on January 24th. So the connections between individuals like Zacarias Moussaoui or Ted Kaczynski, which, if not last week, then the week before, we discussed the article written by Ted's brother called Ted and the CIA, asking if his brother was a Manchurian candidate in the first sentence. So when you see these characters come out of the woodwork and they only seem to deal with the biggest cases, and to those of us in the skeptical alternative media, the cases fraught with the most problems and holes, and the only conspiracy theories are those coming from the official mouthpieces, so you have to watch when you see these people being appointed to certain situations and certain positions, whether that's people like John Kerry or John D. Rockefeller IV or Ramsey Clark, or in this case, Judy Clark. Are they related? I'm not actually sure. But nothing would surprise us. Frightening, twisted shrine in Arizona killer's yard from the New York Daily News. You may as well have Oswald standing back there holding copies of The Worker and whatever other political magazine that didn't actually jive with the other he was holding, but nonetheless. Gifford shooting captured on surveillance video. I'm not aware if any of that has been released or if anyone's seen anything about it. That's from the Wall Street Journal. But an article that starts to get into some of the mysterious and suspicious and perhaps sinister angles to this story. We mentioned federal judge John Roll. Was he the real target of the assassination? Was he a threat to the Obama agenda? Another article from Sourcefall that, of course, as always, would link back to the Kremlin. A foreign intelligence service report circulating in the Kremlin states that the top U.S. federal judge for the state of Arizona was assassinated barely 72 hours after he made a critical ruling against the Obama administration's plans to begin the confiscation of their citizens' private retirement and banking accounts in order to stave off their nation's imminent economic collapse, and after having the U.S. Marshals protecting him removed. According to this report, federal judge John McCarthy Roll was the chief judge for the United States District Court of the District of Arizona, who this past Friday issued what's called a preliminary ruling in a case titled United States of America versus $333,520 in United States currency et al., wherein he stated he was preparing to rule against Obama's power to seize American citizens' money without clear and convincing evidence of a crime being committed. Is that the case? Is this a smokescreen and the human interest angle is for Giffords when John Roll was the real target? One of Loeffner's victims, the 9-year-old girl, as you have probably no doubt heard by now, was a 9/11 baby, a face of hope, and my man Clyde Lewis pointed this out. And it was the first place I heard and saw it pointed out, is that she was born on 9/11/01 and died on 1/09/11.